Now starts the forum proper, and I'd like to welcome to the stage Fraser McCorkadale, General Manager of Exploration from Newcrest Mining.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my talk. First of all, I'd just like to say it's good to be back at Diggers. We've been based in Melbourne. We haven't been allowed out for the last 2 years, so it is good to be here. In fact, I gave this talk last year from my house in Melbourne, and I had three university-age students meant to be studying, and let me tell you, they give you pretty harsh feedback at the end of your presentations, a lot more than this. So look, what Newcrest does at Diggers is we really take the opportunity to tell our growth story. We present in a lot of forums around the world, but we think that this is an opportunity here to get this message across, and we think it's a pretty good story. I should obviously point out that I'm a geologist, so it is really good for Diggers that your first talk is by a geologist, because I think, as we know, exploration is the lifeline of this industry. The good news is there's been some great discoveries in Australia in the last few years. Winu, obviously Greatland and Newcrest Havieron, and then what De Grey's doing up in the Pilbara is pretty fantastic. So they're there to be made, but we've got to keep them going, otherwise this forum in 10 years will be a bit small. Our usual disclaimer slide, there'll be forward-looking statements. Also, there's resource and reserves, I think I mentioned, and there's competent person statements. There's also a whole bunch of footnotes on slides, so I'd advise you to read those. In fact, I think there's one slide, there's more footnotes than the actual content of the slide. So, before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the Wongatha, the traditional owners of where we are here today. And we'd also like to acknowledge the Mardu, who are the traditional owners and the custodians of the lands at which we explore with Greatland in around the Paterson. We'd like to pay our respects to the past, present and future elders. So look, when I was preparing for this, we actually first presented at Diggers back in 2017, and it was a period where Newcrest had just come out of a period of not a lot of growth. We'd bought Lahire, we went through a period where we didn't do much. And then about 16, 17, under Sandeep Biswar, the company said, we've got to get moving again. And we gave our first talk then, and when I look back now, there's a lot of little cartoons and not a lot of beef behind the slides, but it was a story that we were telling. What we can say now is we've succeeded strategically in repositioning our portfolio. So jump back to 2017. We had 3 Tier 1 assets, and our growth was focused in Australia, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia and West Africa. In fact, we were spending, from an exploration point of view, more money in West Africa than anywhere else. And I think we had one project in Nicaragua, so we just stuck our toe into the Americas. Fast forward now, and we've been successful in exposing ourselves to a large number, or at least 6 Tier 1 assets. And we've done that through the recent acquisition of Brucejack in Canada, the joint venture at Red Chris, also in Canada, and our exposure to Frutal del Norte in Ecuador. So it is a major shift for the company into the Americas. Our growth now is in the Americas, Australia, and obviously Papua New Guinea. Besides the new provinces that we've got, we continue to look for new opportunities in our own backyard. So this is our strategy, and it's a pretty simple strategy. It's all about putting our foot on Tier 1 assets with the aim of transforming those into long-term mines. And that's what Newcrest is about. And both Red Chris and Brucejack fit that criteria. Once we put our foot on that ground, the next bit, and this is the hard bit for us, is about growing it. The challenge that we get given by the company is we've got in there, and now we have to grow that. And that comes through a combination of both exploration and the application of our unique mining capability, and I'll touch on that in a second. We've, fortunately to say, both at Red Chris and Brucejack, we are in the growth phase and we're starting to deliver, and the examples of us continuing to look for growth opportunities in our sort of more traditional search bases is the Havieron story that's been unfolding over the last couple of years. And then the third thing we do is we've got the Tier 1 assets that we've got now, but the brief for the exploration group is we've got to keep looking for the next ones. And we take a somewhat different approach. It's all through partnerships. We don't go out and generate our own ground. We know where we want to be, but we think the best way to do that is through partners. So we hunt for the best partners with the best ground, and then it's a collaboration between the two companies to get to where we need to get to. So this story about Tier 1 assets is really Newcrest. It's why how we've grown since 1991, and it's the way that we continue to grow. We've been very successful in transforming projects into long-term mines. A few examples, or a couple of examples here, is obviously Telfer, which has actually been around for, I think we're getting close, over 40 years, getting close to 50 years. Cadia, which started off as an exploration play back in the early 90s, been mining since about 97 and got a very long future. We've got Indonesia on there at Goss. And then we've got our two new districts, Red Chris and Brucejack, where we believe will do the same journey. How we do that transformation is through exploration. And generally it's the exploration group going out, and those discoveries have come deeper. So if you look at what we do, it's pretty simple. Get on the ground and then start changing the search space. Through that, Newcrest has had to develop its mining capability, its underground mining capability, and in particular our bulk underground mining capability. So we've done that, and we now reap rewards from that. You can see that from Cadia. That then in turn becomes a great advantage for the exploration group, because we can look deeper. And when you look at the industry right now, as we start looking deeper, we think we're pretty well positioned. So if we jump into our new districts and just talk about what we're doing in there, both Brucejack and Red Chris are located in an area that's referred to as the Golden Triangle in northern British Columbia in Canada. Now, the reason why it's called the Golden Triangle, it is one of the premier gold-endowed provinces in the world with over 270 million ounces of gold. What Newcrest is really excited by, and I should say that we're excited by, is that we've captured the highest grade porphyry copper system in the district, Red Chris, and we've also been successful in identifying or grabbing the highest grade epithermal at Brucejack. We should point out that Newcrest now is the biggest miner in this region, and we're also the biggest explorer. We'll spend about $70 million US in this area over the next 12 months. And so this question sometimes gets asked by lawyers in our company. One of the advantages for working for a big company, you get money to play with, but you get lots of lawyers asking you lots of questions. And when we say things, you've always got to justify why. So when they ever say, well, can you say that Brucejack's a high-grade deposit? We show them these slides. This is the characteristic of Brucejack. It contains extremely high grade gold, and it's very common to see grades greater than 1,000 grams, and that's what drives the mine. And what you see, it is unique in many ways that the gold is actually very fine and forms in bands and veins. So it's not your classic coarse nuggety deposit. It is what you see here. And these are some of the samples, two samples from underground and then one from drill core in the top of the diagram. But for gold bugs, it's a great place to visit. I've got to say the slides look good at this scale as well. So Brucejack, it's in the Golden Triangle, but it's interesting where it is. It's surrounded by a bunch of porphyries, which Newcrest doesn't own. They're owned by third parties. There's about 6 of them. And when you get up, it's interesting when you get up in a helicopter and fly over this, you've got these big porphyries, you've got the epithermal district in the middle of it, and there's easily over 100 million ounces. So it is a really fantastic place for exploration just because of the metal pedigree. The main characteristics of Brucejack, when the snow's off the area, which is only like for 2 or 3 months of the year, you see a band of alteration, which is about 500 metres to 1 kilometre wide, that runs north-south from Golden Marmot in the top of the slide, which is a new discovery, to Bridge Zone in the south. Our operation is centred on Valley of the Kings, which is producing just over or greater than 300,000 ounces a year. And the interesting thing about Valley of the Kings, it's only a recent discovery. It was only made in 2010. And what that means is a lot of the exploration or a lot of the work since 2010 has all been about Valley of the Kings. And it's really only the last 12 to 18 months that Brucejack exploration team and now Newcrest is starting to look outside of that area. We have a very aggressive exploration program in place. We're going to drill over 200,000 metres this year. And on this slide here up in here is the long section through the area. So here's Valley of the Kings. What's shown in red is the resource, all the drilling, and all those dots are gold. And what we've been able to do in the last 12 months is we've found this north block, and now we're finding the 1080, and we've been releasing, some of those results there, and you can see some of the really high grade on that slide. Our drill rigs are continuing right now to define those zones of mineralisation to demonstrate the continuity and the footprint of the mineralisation, because the Valley of the Kings is basically open in all directions. The other thing to note about this slide is once you head out of this area, very little drilling, even though the alteration corridor, as you saw on that last slide, or as you can see in here, continues in that area. We've also got a surface program in place, and it's very interesting for Australians getting used to snow. We only can explore for 2 to 3 months, but right now we've got 4 drill rigs on the deck. And what happened was Brucejack about 12 months ago undertook a major surface targeting exercise, including machine learning. And one of the key targets that came out of this was Golden Marmot, which was the least explored at that point of time. They went in there last year and they drilled a bunch of holes, and that was successful in identifying a new zone or a new area that contains Valley of the Kings style mineralisation. And we're seeing the same style of high-grade veins, and you can see the gold veins in there. And again, we're seeing these really high grades of over 1,000 grams. So, as I said, right now we've got our drill rigs in there, and the aim is to demonstrate the continuity of this area and also the footprint of the mineralisation, because the mineralisation is still open. So this really shows at Brucejack we've hit the ground, we've ticked the first box, and that's we've acquired it. Now we're into the next phase, and it's all about the growth. If we jump over to Red Chris is a joint venture with Imperial and Newcrest. As I said before, the reason that Newcrest went in this, or one of the reasons, was its high-grade nature, and that's one of the things that we look for in porphyries. We don't want the common garden variety porphyries. We want things that have got grade, because that's where the money generator in these systems are. And that is the big feature of Red Chris. It's rich in both gold and copper, and actually contains very high-grade gold in places. You can see values up to 18 grams. That's highly unusual for porphyry systems. We do not see that at Cadia. We do get higher grade, but not at that level. So again, it's showing this part of the world is very different. The reasons that Newcrest went into this is pretty simple. One, there's Imperial had identified an underground deposit at East Zone, and Newcrest wanted to get exposure to that so that we could apply our bulk mining capability, and then we saw the growth potential. We released our PFS last year, and what it did show is that Red Chris has the potential to be a long-term tier 1 underground operation by leveraging off our experiences and histories of block caving in Australia. The other thing that we went in for is growth, as we said, and until Newcrest went in, the porphyry system stopped actually there on that line. The feeling was that we knew the previous companies, Imperial, they knew that this fault played some sort of role that was, it was either terminated the mineralisation or offset the mineralisation, and they drilled a couple of holes out here and not much success. We then started systematically stepping out, and one of the first holes that we drilled, we got 76 metres, about 1.5 grams gold and 1.5% copper, which is good for a porphyry. Since then, we've been successful in identifying a corridor now of about 800 metres long. So we've actually significantly increased the extent of the corridor. And then we've identified higher grade in here at East Ridge. And we're able to define an exploration target, which we released in our quarterly, which was out 2 weeks ago. And if you're interested, our quarterly is also at our booth, where we're happy to talk about it. And what we're doing right now is carrying out more drilling to advance the exploration target, and we've got, I think, 7 drill rigs under there. The other thing we should notice is that Newcrest has actually started a decline, and we're already drilling from underground. So that's one of the things our company does, is we're pretty agile, and when we see something, we move pretty quick. So Red Chris is a really good example of where Newcrest can come in and add value through both our exploration DNA and our mining DNA, and transform a district potentially into a district, T1 district. This is just a slide through it for the geologists. The mineralisation is hosted with porphyries, a belt of porphyries through here. The high grade is with these little, there's about 5 phases of porphyries. The high grade is located around these smaller, earlier phase porphyries. And they're not very big. They're probably only 50 by 50 or maybe a little bit bigger and a couple of 100 metres high, but they contain phenomenal grade. It's a very concentrated metal. The interesting thing from an exploration point of view, drill up here, you don't see them. So our attack here is if we see porphyries, we drill deeper. And the advantage is we know if we do find it, we can mine it. Now, jumping back to our traditional search bases, and this is in this part of the world, this is the Patterson, and one of the stories that's been unfolding for us in Greatland over the last couple of years has been the Havieron joint venture. Newcrest joint ventured in there in 2019 with Greatland, and what we've done is leveraged off the great work that Callum Baxter did at Greatland. You know, we can never give them enough, thanks for what they did, because they went in there and for a junior drilled some really deep holes, hit some significant mineralisation, and from that Newcrest has been able to go in. And what we would say is the two companies in the exploration space have worked very close, and we've significantly advanced this project in a very small period of time. We've drilled, I think, just over 250,000 metres, and as we talk right now, we've still got 6 drill rigs churning away up at Havieron. It's located 45 kilometres east of Telfer, under about 400 metres of cover, centred on a bullseye geophysical anomaly. And if you were to strip the cover off, what you would see is this ovoid shape of alteration. The line here in blue, it's about 600 by 600, and we've taken it down to at least 1,000 metres below the unconformity, so roughly 1,500 metres from surface. That alteration is centred around a bunch of northwest trending structures, some north-south structures, and a whole bunch of diorites, sills, and dikes. And what the mineralisation is associated or formed within these very focused breccia pipes that just rip through this system. And what's happened is those breccia pipes have coalesced to form the major zone of mineralisation, which we refer to as the southeast crescent zone, which is in this area through here. Now that, as the name suggests, is a crescent. If you were to stretch it out, it's about 600 metres long in the upper parts, about 30 metres wide. But as you get deeper, it starts tapering. The grade is, and we're talking about high grade here, it starts tapering. The grade is still there and still open, and we're down at about over 1,000 metres. It's still there, and we're still drilling underneath it. And you can see some of the better results at depth. The interesting thing, though, of the last 6 months is the eastern breccia. It appears to be a discrete zone of mineralisation that sits outboard of the southeast crescent zone. We first drilled it in 2020, and hole 84 hit about 300 metres at 2 grams. If you were to look at this core, you'd struggle to understand why it's carrying that grade. Very different to what we saw at Crescent, but infill drilling is now starting to see the higher grade like we see at Crescent, and we're seeing some of the 62 metres at 5 grams and 0.3% copper. The drilling, as I said, our drilling right now is focused on top of that. Eastern breccia, only if you were to drill above it, you can't see it. So you only see it at around about 800 metres below that unconformity. It's a very confined breccia pipe. But what it does raise is the potential that we believe there's more of these floating around Havieron. And that's one of the things that we've also got in place now, is that we're chasing both southeast crescent and eastern breccia. But the question is, where's the rest of these other little breccia pipes? So we're in the process now of moving our drill rigs into this area. In addition to that, Havieron has got a unique exploration model or target, very different to Telfer. And one thing that John Horonsky's always been in our ear about is always resetting your exploration maturity clock by applying either new technologies or new models. So applying the Havieron model is actually opening up the Patterson again, and it's something we're applying on the Antipa ground and the Greatland joint ventures, as well as our own 100% ground. So we're actually going back into our Telfer ground and re-looking at that right now. So that's our story in our existing provinces. But as I said before, the search continues. We always are out there looking for the new ones. We take a very focused approach to our exploration. We're not everywhere. We only go to, obviously, gold-rich belts, so that's a given. But we only really go where we can leverage off our capability and we bring something to the table. What we would say in this space is over the last 12 to 18 months, COVID did hit our greenfields exploration pretty heavily. We stopped exploring in South America. We put a halt on it, and in the US, because in those areas, we're very strongly connected to the local communities, and there was a whole issue about the impact of COVID, of us bringing COVID into the community, and that was a big risk for us. And so as a result, we slowed down our exploration so we were comfortable that we had enough controls to protect both our own people and the communities which we work in. And we must say that that's gone very, very well, and so we're back up and running. We now are in the process of refurbishing or replenishing our portfolio, turning ground over and hunting for new opportunities. As I said before, we take a partnership approach to it. So we use this part of the talk to advertise that Newcrest is out there looking for projects. We would like more in Australia. We're presently heavily focused on the Patterson, but we'd like to get more. So one of the reasons we do come to Diggers is that we've got a large presence here and at the booth. So if you do have a project that you're looking for a home, please reach out to us because we've been floating around. So we'll finish on, well, what does Newcrest bring to the table? Well, we first of all think that we work very well in partnerships, and we've demonstrated that. We believe that exploration is a team sport. It's not an individual sport. No one group or one person holds all the ideas. So we take a very collaborative approach. Our partners get exposure to our exploration DNA, which is over 40 years of exploration knowledge. We also get the advantage of getting to use our innovative exploration technology, which we heavily invested in, and also our search space is somewhat different to the rest. One of the great things is we take a very flexible approach to deals, from option level deals all the way, as you've seen, through the mergers and acquisitions. And one of the things that we do get a lot of feedback from our peers and our groups we deal with, for a company like Newcrest, we're pretty agile. So we can move pretty quick, sign a deal, and get on the ground pretty quick. And I think Greatland and the Newcrest partnership at Havieron is a really good example of how two companies have moved pretty quick to get that along. So, look, that's all I've got today. I think it's good to give an update of where Newcrest is. It's good to go back to 2017 and see where we are. And I think it's been a phenomenal ride by the company, and it's been great to be part of it. But I think over the next few years, we're going to even get better and deliver more growth. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fraser. We have time for one question, if there is one from the audience.
Excellent.
Looks like a no. They might be blown away. There's one over here on the right-hand side here. Spotted.
Andrew McKinnon from Melbourne. Good to be back. Just one question. I see you're still in New Guinea. How's the political situation, especially in the highlands around Wafi and there? Are you still interested in New Guinea?
Yeah, no, we've still got, obviously we've got our Lihir gold mine, which is one of our bigger operations, and that operates quite successfully in New Guinea, and we've still got our presence, as you point out, at Wafi Golpu, where we're working with our partners and the government to get that into our studies and production profile. So we're still quite comfortable to be active in New Guinea. So.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Fraser.
Thank you.